Take a seat. Now, as you will know these guys as well as I do, but I'm just going to get them to introduce themselves one by one. Maybe if we start at this end, please. Just a little brief who you are and what you're up to at the moment, in case people haven't encountered you before.
Okay. My name is Johan, and I'm with Sunstone Capital out of Copenhagen. We're a venture fund. We invest in mobile, in consumer internet, and infrastructure. And I spent the last 10 years as an entrepreneur, and then these 3 years with Sunstone. And my role is working with portfolio companies and trying to identify new deals.
Thank you.
Hi. Is it on?
Yes,
yeah, I think
you
it's
are
on. Hi, it's Mattias Ljungman. I'm a partner at Atomico. Some of our investments include Skype, Jawbone, Klarna, Fab, and Weatherbill, and so on and so forth. We're based in London. We invest primarily in Europe. We have loads of offices around the world where we help our portfolio companies and entrepreneurs expand into new markets like Japan, China, Brazil, and also the Middle East.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Stefan Glänzer. I'm obviously German, as you can hear by my accent, but I live in London. I used to be an entrepreneur for 15 years of my life, having been founder of Ricardo in the first wave and honorary co-founder of Last.fm in the second wave. These days I'm too old to be a proper artist, to be a proper entrepreneur, so I changed side and became a venture capitalist and have recently launched Passion Capital in London with a co-working space, White Bear Yard. We do very early stage seed investments. We did 32 investments in the past 18 months.
Thank you. And Shervin?
My name is Shervin Pishevar. I'm a partner at Menlo Ventures. We invest in a couple companies like Uber, which I missed very much today because I spent 20 minutes looking for a taxi in the streets of Vienna.
Travis, come to Vienna.
Hopefully we'll be here soon.
You should have used my taxi. It's working brilliantly.
Yeah, no thank you. But the other companies are Fab.com, GetAround, a lot of companies in the collaborative consumption space that I've invested in.
Hey, Milo.
And
hello, how are you?
We're pretty excited.
Who's this guy?
We're pretty excited about looking at opportunities in Europe as well. And then recently we just announced an investment in a company called Blackjet, which is Uber for private jets. So you can book a seat for the cost of first class and soon business class on a private jet with your mobile phone. So.
Thank you. And would you like to introduce yourself?
I guess so.
As the late...
Yeah, yesterday night was tough, sorry.
I went to bed at 9. I was here on time, man. Come on.
Well, I'm from Austria, so
I see.
There's always a 15-minute delay in things.
So you're here on Vienna time,
Exactly.
Right?
Vienna time is good, cool time. So I'm Oliver. I'm from speedinvest. We're speed. We are a seed fund here in Vienna. We actually launched this thing here last year together with STARTeurope, and we are really happy how cool it is this year.
Thank you very much. So the purpose of this panel is to get a little bit underneath what's normally covered on the tech blogs and ask these guys some slightly more probing and difficult questions to give you a little bit of insight into how their world works and their experiences of investing and entrepreneurship. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is right now Europe's in a bit of trouble economically, and technology companies are being spoken of, entrepreneurship in general is being spoken of as the savior of the economy, right? But most politicians, what they really want is job creation. And certainly we hear from entrepreneurs about how many jobs they create. But do technology companies really create any jobs? Because I thought, like, you know, the purpose of internet business is to kind of make people redundant, right? That's to create efficiency so that you don't really need people at all. Maybe if Stefan could start us off.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh. Well, yeah, of course they do, yeah. I mean, in the end, it's probably, there's a Kaufman study out there showing that the biggest positive net effect of job creation is actually done by startups. I'm a startup person my whole life. I've probably created myself 1,000 jobs, and being an investor, I don't know, probably factor of 5 to 10 to this. Yes, they do. The question is how sustainable will the jobs be? Yeah? But for temporary effect, yes, of course, we all create jobs.
But I mean, I sort of pitch in there if you don't mind. you look at all kinds of revolutions around that happens over time, right? You have the agricultural revolution, right? And suddenly, before you had to sort of use a horse and plow the fields, right? And then suddenly the tractor came, and by factor of 10 improvement, right? And suddenly people became redundant, and then they moved to cities and so on and so forth. What do? They created the Industrial Revolution. People started working in factories, right? And then now you can sort of say we're in a new revolution, right? And it is a digital revolution. Every business today is somehow affected by our world. I don't think, the fact, you're talking about Uber, we're investors in Halo. This is probably one of the most conservative old businesses that exist. Very quickly we are dramatically changing that industry and shifting things around. So, yes, there is efficiencies created, but there's new jobs created. And I think, if you look at companies, today like Facebook and eBay, they themselves have created a lot of jobs, but their network has created even more jobs. I mean, it's incredible. All these people trading on these places.
Is it fair to say that Facebook creates a lot of jobs? I mean, they employ, what, 3,500 people?
Yeah,
but a comparably sized company from 50 years ago would have employed 100,000.
Yeah, but if I'd be surprised if people here in the audience, most of the majority of them, are not trying to do something on Facebook. So Facebook is becoming a conduit, a distribution point, right? So you can't just look at that in isolation. You have to look at what have they created as an economy. So the Facebook economy is way bigger than the 3,000.
Okay. And maybe, I mean, there's a study out there, the Kaufman Foundation did this last year. Net creation of jobs in the US, for example, everything comes from startups. Everything comes from new companies. It's numbers. We don't have to philosophize around it. Old companies, 5 years older, there's a net loss of jobs, and the new companies actually have 80% of all the new jobs are created by these guys. So it's startups. There's no question.
I just want to be real here. Yes, there's if you look at the retail world, there's going to be, as Yuri Milner recently said, there's 40 million retail jobs are going to disappear in a decade ahead. So, but the replacement is a trend, which I think is pretty interesting, which is a whole new type of job, really in the excess capacity space, where people also have excess capacity in terms of time. So the new retail job was actually going to be taken up by these types of companies, whether it's a Uber or Halo or a TaskRabbit or Exec or a Postmates, where people that are either underemployed or unemployed are able to find new opportunities to make money.
Well, let me ask you,
the new retail job is a replacement for these types of box retail stores are being distributed across cities in terms of completely new types of jobs that didn't exist before.
Let me ask you, Shervin, because you're very deeply embedded in the Silicon Valley elite, if you like, and we've seen some extraordinary flips going on recently in Silicon Valley. But I suppose one question I have is, these companies that make heavy losses and even more heavy losses and even more heavy losses, and eventually they get acquired by somebody, they don't really pay any tax. I mean, are these companies really good for the economy?
Are they what?
Are they good for the economy? Is this a net positive for the economies in which these companies are founded? I mean, they don't pay any tax, they don't create many jobs, they lose money, and then somebody buys them and shuts them down. I mean, what's the end game here?
I mean, so in Austria,
the companies that I've been looking at are actually incredibly net positive contributing companies. Where again, going back to an Uber example. Where it's impacting city economies, increasing efficiencies of getting people from point A to point B to actually spend money within the local economy. Drivers who are making $10,000 a month, totally transforming their lives. Drivers who went from owning 1 car to 20 cars. There's very few opportunities where you can have a company like an Instagram, which has no revenue but is bought for $1 billion. That's like lightning striking. But the growth in companies like a Halo or an Uber is unprecedented as well in terms of actual real money-making companies. And that, I think, is a emerging trend which is exciting because we look at the growth of mobile around the world, especially smartphones, and these types of capabilities in terms of being able to push a button and get service is like turning on a whole new grid within cities. And that is having tremendous economic positive impacts within those cities. So I'm very, very positive about that.
Johan, do you agree with this? Do you think we're seeing a new generation of tech companies that actually, are making a lot of money?
Well, I mean, if you look at it from a high-level economic perspective, if you see the macro trends in Europe, I mean, you have, if you peel away all the layers of the onion, you have two factors that drives economy, right? You have growth in population, increase in productivity. I mean, we're not increasing the population, so we should hopefully be increasing productivity. And I mean, all the companies that we're involved in one way or another, has that aim.
I mean, I would, you know, if you don't mind, be a little bit controversial. You okay with that, Milo?
I think that's the point.
Good. No, but I mean, in terms of, if you look at like Europe compared to the US, I think actually that kind of activity in terms of Instagrams and so on is not as a usual phenomenon, right? And actually because of that, you actually, and I think most of the people here in the audience are probably thinking about, you know, how do I create a business model that really, really works and that is actually generating cash? And if you look at across the board, European businesses, they're very good at doing that. And so I'd say, you know, even ones that are in the same sort of industry, they're actually, what are they doing? They're producing very good models. And some of them are extremely, not only are they good models, they're actually growing very quickly as well. So the combination is pretty fantastic. And that's because today, more than any time before, it's easier than ever to start a company. You don't need as much capital. And actually, you can start actually generating a good business very, very quickly.
But there are some downsides, aren't there, to runaway successful tech businesses? I mean, is Facebook a moral company?
I honestly get a bit annoyed by these questions. I really think, I mean, we have been, when we started Through United, we were 5 people, then we grew up to 90 people. We paid, of all the money that we earned, we paid 50% to the government at the end of the day, because all goes to salaries. So that's where the money goes. So there is no question that we actually pay a big contribution to the state, and then if you sell the company, again a big chunk of that money goes back to the state. So it's ridiculous. I think a lot of the money that actually goes into venture capital funded companies goes back to the government, and there's a huge positive contribution, and we just should move on from that.
It does seem to be, though, doesn't it? I mean, maybe Stefan could help us here. I mean, do you think the guys that run these phenomenally successful tech businesses, I mean, they often seem to me like quite sociopathic individuals. You know, is that what it takes to build a successful tech business? Because it's almost like you need to put some of your morality on hold to build a company like Facebook.
Yeah, I'm probably more kind of old-style entrepreneur. I actually love the idea of being able to do handshake deals and love the idea of having a relatively high morality. On the other hand, I mean, especially as venture capitalists, you need to show returns, yeah? And you need to be able to pay back money to your own investors. So I wouldn't call this, I still believe and hope that business world has enough space for actually being profitable, making money, and having a very high moral ethos to what you want to achieve. And actually the real great entrepreneurs, most of them, have this dual ethos in them.
But I mean, to me though, I don't think that, I mean, I think the moral issue is like you say, it's a very important component. And I think, to be honest, great businesses are built on those foundations, and they're usually very lasting. Whereas, you know, if they're not, they become a little bit flash in the pan. But I think a lot
of technology businesses could be characterized as flash in the
pan,
right?
But the thing is, I mean, take probably the most successful, one of the most successful European companies is probably Wonga, who are doing short-term loans. Yeah, you can argue that this is a highly unmoral company, unethical. Yeah, because these guys charge around 4,500% of interest a year. Not that anyone is taking money for a year, but they do short-term loaning for 10 days. Is this now unethical or not? When I heard first of it, I thought I will never touch this, because it's unmoral for me. In the meantime, I changed my mind, because it's taken actually, this market has always existed. I'm from Hamburg, where the Reeperbahn is close, and you find money for 10 days, very easy there. But it's actually adding a new way of getting this existing market out of the total dark age and the dark color, and it's bringing it to the legal zone. So
we're not going to agree on the subject of Wonga. You know, particularly when the company is targeting students with SEO landing pages to try and encourage 19-year-olds to get into the habit of payday loans. So we can agree to disagree on that one.
But the point that I also wanted to make, though, is on creativeness. I mean, I think the more important point is that actually, I think you're right in terms of behavior. I think the more interesting behavior is that the community itself is highly creative, right? And in that sense, you're always trying to go against the norm, and you're doing things differently. And it's always about doing, in that sense, you couldn't say, oh, well, these are crazy people, right? And they're doing crazy stuff. But the whole purpose is really it's kind of creative disruption, right? In terms of doing something new and different. And I think that is extremely important, because that's how we iterate, that's how we get forward. That's how we get progress. It's not about doing the same thing, and it's not about, small changes here and there. It's about doing big changes. And then it's us, as everybody in the industry, you have to feel comfortable about doing something very, very different. When, Wonga was, doing something very different.
Let me ask everybody on the panel here. I mean, you've all put money into businesses. So I think Stefan and I have a friend in common who turned down investing in Wonga because he thought it was immoral. Have you ever turned down investment in a company because you thought it was just way off the mark, and it was going to, if it succeeded, it was going to have terrible consequences for people?
Less because
we'll get back to positive questions in a minute, I promise.
Less because of the business model, more about the persons. I think they're people you don't want to work with. That's clear. But on the other hand,
can you give us an example of somebody you turned down?
Well, we had an oligarch, who had a really cool company, but it was 100% owned by him, and he had also owned like 50 other companies and was pushing things between them, and didn't feel comfortable doing that. In any case, I think we are talking about the things you don't hear about typically in the press, and one thing you don't hear about, entrepreneurship is ugly. You always break things, you always mess up things, you always leave people behind, and you lose friendships, and that's the way it is. And the very successful companies, these stories come up, right? But at the end of the day, every single good entrepreneur will do that, and that's the truth, and that's ugly. So.
Okay. To me, I've thought a lot about this, and recently launched something called 1% of Nothing, which is about entrepreneurships giving equity when they found the company to whatever causes they believe in. One of the things that I realize over time is business itself and technology, for that matter, in and of itself, within its own silo, is an amoral enterprise. It's not a moral enterprise. Entrepreneurship, however, is a moral enterprise. Entrepreneurship is a movement, and within the field of entrepreneurship, there is an evolution, I believe, in terms of wanting to have an impact, wanting to make a dent in the universe, and having entrepreneurs like a Steve Jobs that inspire people to think in bigger ways. Or now, to me, Elon Musk is one of those incredible entrepreneurs who is going for moonshots, and not just in one company, from Tesla to SpaceX and Solar City. He is going after incredibly big ideas, and so the best trend that I can see is that entrepreneurship in and of itself as an enterprise, as a moral enterprise, is now reaching a point where I've just seen it in my own generation. We are now beginning to just realize and become conscious of our power and our talent and our capacity, because it takes iteration, it takes a kind of A/B testing over companies to get the skills to shoot a freaking rocket into space, right? Within a time period that no governments could actually match these days. So that, I think, in terms of the point of this conference and also this discussion, is what's most inspiring, is to see entrepreneurs take on that kind of moral ambition to have a big impact on the world and use technology, which is really without morals in and of itself, as a tool to make our lives better.
If I can pitch in on, because I totally agree with you on that one, and I would even add to this, if you're kind of looking at it a little bit in a vacuum of the tech scene. I think if you ranked industries, whatever, oil and gas, weapons, and whatever, I would think that our sector is probably way at the top. And why? Because ultimately a lot of our companies, right, be it in music, be it in communication, we're creating access. You know, like there's more access today because, you know, the people blame the events of Arab Spring in terms of good and bad around that, but, you know, that's because of what our community is doing, right? And, you know, people today can talk more freely than they've ever been able to do before. The costs of doing that have reduced dramatically. You have more information. The reason why we have these bubbling of great entrepreneurs and great companies is because there's access to information that's never been before. So people in Vietnam, you know, now know what people are doing in the valley in terms of building businesses. So it's, I think, you know, in terms of a moral compass, I think ours is extremely high if you compare it to other sectors.
Yeah, I mean, Shervin mentioned big ideas, and it felt like for a while like the internet was running out of them. And then suddenly technology entrepreneurs started to do these like amazing other things, like, you know, wanting to go to Mars. Johan, what do you think are the big unaddressed areas? Where can technology entrepreneurs go next? I mean, we can pretty much do everything we need to do with the internet now, right? So what is technology going to fix next?
I mean, for me, it's very much if you sort of looked at where capital is going and where it's not going. I mean, one of the areas that I would really like to see toppled over and I'd really like to see disrupted is banking. It's finance industry. It's one of those things that has been ripe for disruption so long, but there's a whole decade of good innovation and technology, user interface, user experience that just hasn't made it into financing.
Do you have any? Do you agree, or do you think there's something else better that we should be spending our time on?
Personally, I'm more excited about the entrepreneurship factor. I want to have at least 10-15% of Austrians start their own company, who no matter what they do, really go into entrepreneurship and use that kind of low entry barrier that we have with the internet business nowadays to be successful, and that's much more interesting than each individual area or each individual vertical.
Is that a good thing, like encouraging everybody to be entrepreneurs? Because most people don't have what it takes, right? So is it a good thing for the sake of it?
It's good to have 10-15% of the population doing that. It's not good to have everybody, but there's such a big gap between us and the entrepreneurial societies, and that's a big social change, and that's what excites me. It's not the banking or
do you think Austria is particularly far behind some of the other countries in Europe?
Central Europe doesn't have the tradition. Central Europe has the talent, and we need to get moving on that. And there's a big opportunity there because it's a wide space. There's nobody there. So,
Stefan, what's holding some of these European countries back? What are some of the things that are retarding the growth of entrepreneurship?
I have a different view. I think what's holding us back is the desire for perfection and the less desire of being absolutely fantastic in sales and marketing. I think that the entrepreneurial culture is very similar compared to the US. Here in Europe, the only thing is we get less media attention, and we used to talk way less about this. But I'm not seeing too big of a difference with the entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, we have to keep in mind 300 years ago, most of the entrepreneurial guys have actually left the old continent, yeah? And the conservative people stayed, and that's the big DNA trail going on, yeah, towards America. And you can't deny that. But the main effect is the society in the US is different. I think we have coped up with the DNA, and I actually see as many great ambitious entrepreneurs in Europe as I see them in the US. You can make a difference towards Asia. That's a total different ball game there, especially China. And I encourage actually all European entrepreneurs to stop looking west and start looking east, because I think that's going to be way more interesting. We can learn way more. We have learned all the Hollywood blah blah schmarrn now for enough decades, and we should look towards east and build on our own strength.
If I can just add on that, I mean, if you look at Europe as an entrepreneurial center, you really see a trend in multi-urbanization of innovation. It's coming from everywhere. If you look at Eastern Europe, you have so many cities, like if you take Warsaw, Vilnius, you have a class of highly educated, highly ambitious entrepreneurs who are willing to create global companies. I mean, for me, the likelihood of seeing the next big thing in Europe coming out of Warsaw, Vilnius, Riga, or Helsinki is just as big as seeing it coming from Berlin or London.
Okay, so if we have the entrepreneurs, do we have the investors? Because, I mean, something that occurs to me is, you know, we actually, yeah, there's quite a lot of noise around European entrepreneurship right now. There are less intelligent things being written about the state of the venture capital industry, which is in serious crisis. I mean, there's no point denying it, right? So, I mean, Mattias, what's gone wrong, and how do we fix it?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, again, it's a very typical European mindset of concentrating on what's gone wrong. I mean, I think, you know, instead of talking about what's gone right. And I think there is a lot of stories to be talked about there. And I think if you look at the trend, it's, you know, instead of being backward looking, you should be forward looking on these things. And there's no doubt in my mind, and I think you'd agree, that today is better than it was 2 years ago, and it's better than it was 4 years ago. And I think, you know, it's a time factor. So I think, you know, again, if you looked at the European map and you wanted to map out, you know, how many billion-dollar companies exist in Europe, and you did that 5, 6 years ago, you wouldn't find that many. Today, it's actually, there's quite a few, and it's a growing number. So I think it's just time. We now have better and better entrepreneurs. They've, you know, they've learned from each other. There's been this sort of the middle management that's gone from these really good exits that have then moved on, started their own businesses. You know, and you talk about starting up your own companies. I think that, you know, there's more people doing that. And then I think it's also interesting for a lot of people not to just start their own companies, but join interesting companies or be part of that process. So to me, it's a time factor. And I think, again, I think one of the things we don't in Europe talk about the things that have gone right. You know, I would say that, you know, in music, the music industry, Europe dominates digitally. There's more games. We're just killing it in terms of profitability, great models. And there's loads of really good ones. So there's like 6 or 7, you know, I think that you know, compared to the US, they don't even exist. So I think we're very good at like looking at what we do wrong and how do we improve and all that stuff. We don't spend enough time of thinking about, you know, what we're doing right.
So just there is one cultural difference that I've at least touched on, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But there's venture capital, but something that's even more important to that is what I call mentor capital. And mentor capital in the U.S. is the culture of really kind of giving of your time, essentially for free, with no expectations, to mentor young people. And it's something that was transformational for me multiple times coming out of college when I wanted to start my own company. And so I would love to see more mentorship happening in Europe of highly successful people giving of their time more to younger people, not just in terms of investing, but just giving time, giving, you know, advice and mentorship.
Let me ask you, how do we...
I know it exists, but it just needs to become more...
How do we encourage Europeans to give back more? And not just in mentorship, but also in money? Because, I mean, it's difficult to get good numbers on this, but people throw around numbers like 20% of entrepreneurs return in Silicon Valley. They typically reinvest as an angel, and it's more like 2 to 5% in Europe. So it's not just mentorship, it's money as well that needs to start getting fed back in by people with successes. Right? How do we encourage Europeans to do that?
So when we raised our angel fund, we had 35 people putting money in, and like 30 of them were actually coming out of the internet industry. So it was really hard to get the old money guys to come to the internet industry. And at the end of the day, now step by step, more success stories, more good companies coming out. We are slowly getting that, but that's still, I mean, there's so much money around. There's so much money in Austria, so much money in Germany that hasn't yet touched our industry. And I think it's a matter of time, it's a matter of very visible success stories to get these people and actually put a small fraction, and then suddenly there's no more capital issues here. That's a big thing. Yeah.
So Johan, is it a communication issue? Do we just need a better quality press?
That's a good question. I mean,
more Milos.
No, I've written at length about my views on tech bloggers, but I mean, you know, do we need some more good quality tech reporters?
But I mean, it's always the same problem with press, that you have the journalist who provides the abstraction level. I mean, he formalizes the story to a level where everybody can understand it. And in that process, you obviously lose a lot of nuances, and you lose a lot of features of the story. But it's
I mean, you also lose nuance and features if you're just fucking hopeless, which a lot of the tech writers in Europe are, right?
Well, that's true. But I mean, it's...
That's true. But I mean, I think that's what component of it, right? I think generally maybe us as a community, you know, we need to spend more time talking about what's going right and what we're doing right. I think, you know...
Is there a way we could bypass the blogs? I mean, could you guys maybe do like forums or something, you know, speak more directly to entrepreneurs?
Maybe.
I mean, I don't know what that would look like, but maybe some sort of industry event where you just, you know, kind of do very structured discussions like this would be better.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we had last week. We had in our white yard in London. We had 11 venture capitalists holding office hours together. I'm not sure whether this has happened somewhere else. It was Index, Excel. It was the big ones, the new ones. And we all just invited 300 entrepreneurs coming to our office and spend time. I think times have actually changed, but I agree, the mentor, the understanding, it's about giving back, it's about sharing. We seriously need to work on that, yeah? Because I'm German. The way I grew up, I don't want to tell you my idea, Mattias, because you might steal it and so on. Yeah, that's...
You might be right.
I mean, without...
Since you're Swedish, yeah, I agree.
Without meaning to flatter you, Stefan, I mean, you're one of a relatively few European investors who are incredibly open and available, you know, transparent and approachable. A lot of European investors aren't. How do we encourage them to engage a little bit more with entrepreneurs so that entrepreneurs understand better how venture works?
I would, you know, Shervin, tell me, you know, I think there's actually a lot part of also in the Valley of people that are not approachable as well, right? But the thing is, it's such a big community. There's a whole component of, you know, there's this good core that is actually very, very available, right? And so it's a slightly scale issue as well, right? And you know, because at least my impression is that, you know, there are certain sort of walls there too, right? That it's difficult sometimes to get through. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I you know, from a very young age, I was able to, I mean, I emailed Jamie Dimon when I was 23 years old. Not emailed, I actually called 411 and got his number in the directory, and he answered the phone himself. He's one of the most important people in the financial world. You know, I emailed Mitch Kapoor when I was, you know, 21, and he emailed me back in 5 minutes. There is definitely, maybe at the very upper strata, it's harder to get through the gatekeepers, but I haven't seen that change. There is an openness in Silicon Valley to you know, talent and brilliance and coming in from almost anywhere in the world. So. I just think it just needs to become more pervasive here.
But then I guess the question is how, I mean, in some ways it's, you know, how unavailable are they really? And maybe you know, I'm not aware of that, but, you know, I think, you know, in terms of the willingness to be available, like you said, there's like, you know, 11 came to your thing, you know, we're constantly on the road around meeting people. I still think it's a problem of quantity, you know, there's not enough. There's definitely a problem of, you know, like you said, I think Stefan's doing an amazing job in terms of covering, you know, what is a very, very big sector. And then, you know, we need more. We need more of this kind of people, but you know, I think it's a quantity problem.
Okay.
And a change of culture. But when I raised capital for my first company 10 years ago, it was bankers.
Yeah.
Like the European venture scene was basically bankers and public.
Failed bankers mostly,
failed
right?
bankers, or
some of them are still partners in European venture
bankers.
funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with ties and everything, so it was scary. And I remember the US.
Yeah, where did you get your tie?
Berchtesgaden. It was like €9. It's a fucking disgusting tie, but it's the only thing that went with the outfit.
Well, you should be a venture capitalist.
Yeah, no, I know. I could afford guys like those. So okay, let's as we entering the home straight, I'll talk about some things maybe that you don't normally discuss. What do you really think about the quality of entrepreneurs in Europe?
I think it's good, and I think it's getting a lot better. I mean, you have so many people. I mean, the whole rise of entrepreneurship is sort of coming to the second generation, where you had a lot of the first-time entrepreneurs who grinded their teeth on perhaps a bit of government funding or Jeremy programs, who by now have the experience to do their second startup or the third startup. You have the generation of people coming out of very successful startups. So I think it's improving rapidly. That's good.
So Shervin, I mean, we hear a lot of optimism from Europe, but as somebody with most of your 2 feet planted in the valley, is it really realistic for Europe to expect to have one of those big home runs in the next 5 years? Is something bubbling up?
I definitely I believe that some of the greatest technology companies, internet companies in the next 5 to 10 years are going to come out of Europe. I deeply believe that. I'm close with Daniel Ek, and I'm excited about Daniel over time beginning to give more of his, and he is already giving mentorship and advice to entrepreneurs around him in Sweden and beyond. And so I'm spending a lot of time here looking for that entrepreneur and trying to find him or her. So we'll see.
What do you think about the quality of entrepreneurship in Austria?
The quality is there. I mean, we are Central European entrepreneurs have been used to make very much out of very little because they had to be capital efficient because there was no capital. So that's good. We don't have to worry about that. What we have to worry about is the global vision and actually thinking big and not being happy to just be a local champion in Prague or in Austria. That doesn't matter. And this kind of big vision needs to be much more present on everybody's mind. That's the main thing, I think.
Okay. Let's enter the dangerous subject of predictions. And we'll start with Mattias. What is Europe going to generate? Where are the successes going to be? What vertical? What are we going to really hit a home run in?
So I think the beauty of working in our sector is you never know what to expect, right? And I think, for example, when Atomico started up 6 years ago, it's kind of hard to believe that there was no iPhone. And the iPhone's completely changed our world. And I think it's always those things that happen. There's moments that just lots of stuff change. But I would say the trends are still as such as, mobile is becoming still more and more important. I think, the fintech industry, there's not much that's happened. There's a lot of exciting stuff there. I think just traditional industries that haven't really been tapped in are going to be tapped in. And like I said in the beginning, I think the digital world is taking over the broader economy, and there'll be some really new exciting stuff that none of us have really thought of, but you can see certain trends that are coming where you can see, okay, look, this is probably what's going to happen, and that becomes really exciting because it becomes a moment of change.
So Michael Arrington famously said on stage that European entrepreneurs don't work hard enough. It's certainly been my experience. Your co-working space is pretty derelict after 7 p.m., isn't it? And I don't know how many of those guys are working at home. Do you think entrepreneurs in Europe work hard enough? Because they certainly don't seem to put the hours in that entrepreneurs in the Valley do.
I think you're seeing a change in that subject as well. I mean, as we were talking about before, there is a change that people or entrepreneurs tend to think bigger. They tend to have larger visions. And they know that if they have larger visions, they have to drive larger ambitions. So that's part of the whole rise of entrepreneurship, again, that people are thinking bigger, they are more ambitious, they are working harder.
Yeah. Do the VCs work hard enough in Europe? I mean, Shervin, from the VCs you see when you come over here, I mean, a lot of them seem to spend a lot of time not on their jobs, as opposed to guys I know in Sand Hill Road basically spend 8 to 8 in the office 7 days a week. Do we need to give the VCs in Europe a kick up the arse as well as the entrepreneurs?
Well, I mean, the culture in Silicon Valley, the companies I see who are, performing and executing at incredible levels are the ones where people are working, around the clock and almost a 24/7 obsession with their vision and dream. I see that in companies and entrepreneurs like Daniel at Spotify. You see that culture, people working over the weekends. There's trade-offs to that, but in the early founding stages of a company, the chances of a vision and idea actually coming to life are so low that it takes that kind of energy and commitment. I think that the culture is here to do that. I see it in entrepreneurs. Whether it's pervasive or not is a different question. The other aspect is, people have to be hungry, and it's not just about physical hunger, but also the hunger of ambition, and realizing that it's okay to be ambitious, that it's not a negative, that to dream big, to want to make it big, to want to create a lot of success, both individually and as a collective, as a team, is not a immoral decision. It's a very moral one, and it's a good one, and we should embrace that.
I'd love to second that. It's all about the ambition, and I actually don't understand why entrepreneurs aren't working harder. Because when I started, I worked my ass off.
I didn't mean to single out your offices, by the way, because it's the same everywhere. But it's just because I'm a tenant of Stefan.
It's an issue all over Europe. But looking at ambition, I don't get why we at the Olympics, even though it's a typical sales, again, on place 1 on the medal count, USA. But if you actually count all European medals, gold medals together, it's Europe would be on top. So much to how to do real sales and marketing. But what you really see on this is that in our society the ambitions are equally, they are actually superior compared to China and compared to the US. Now let's please get it done digital as well in the next 10 years. That is my main message. Just let's stop complaining and let's build winning companies with you guys together, with the Asian guys together, all together, and then I'm happy.
Part of the formula there is, that's great. And part of the formula there is to celebrate entrepreneurship, to celebrate ambition, to celebrate the entrepreneurs who are dreaming big. And part of that is also going back to kind of the media business is rather than having a negative view on that kind of success, putting it on a pedestal so people can actually have the same kinds of role models.
Well, that sounds.
I think the thing is, with the successes that we're getting in Europe, people are immediately looking at. There's a countdown. I got 5 seconds left. I got 5 seconds. No, but I mean, I'm finished. I'm done. Are we done?
I think it's a good positive note to end on. I think we entrepreneurs need to work harder. The press needs to be more positive, and you guys, I don't know, keep showing up for work. All right. Thanks very much to you guys. Big round of applause for our panel, please. Enjoy lunch.